Hey everyone, it's a quick video on my Hub Monster bike, dual adaptto 14 kilowatt, 32 kilowatt peak. So today, after a long time that I've had these adaptos, and pretty much since the beginning of this year I've had this bike, I finally made my charge coil, which I've, as for capacitor wise, I did what the 30 amp adaptto controller has, with 4 little caps, and these are just right out of the adaptto. These are from an adaptto controller, so I can't remember the rating on them offhand, but I know they're rated to 100 volts. I don't know, maybe 500 UF or 1000, I can't remember, but this is not really important. You could use 100 volt 1000 UF caps for them if you want. I'm using my Megapack power factor corrected Victor power supply, 48 volt. It's tuned right at 40 volts, running to 12 gauge wire to 30 amp or 45 amp poles. They're really the same thing. Running to my E-shaped core, same as the one Dr. Bass expressed to use on his post. So mine obviously is built differently. I did try to do the 22 gauge 50 strands that he did, but he probably didn't really elaborate on it, but it is extremely difficult to build, to get that wire, all those 50 strands nice and tight, and to fit 18 turns on this E-core. I can tell you right now, anyone that even attempts to try it, my hands were cramped out and I just gave up. So I did buy it and I did try to do it. So I ended up using 12 gauge wire. And regarding turns, let's see, 3, 6, 7, 8. There's probably about 17, 18 turns in there for sure of 12 gauge wire. So just like he did, except I didn't use the stranded 22 gauge of 50 strands of 22 gauge. So my coil is probably not as durable or high wattage as his, but it is pulling, you know, right now. Well, before I even get to the wattage, but I also put the pieces of PCB in there just to separate the two cores so they're not touching. So inside there as well. Yeah, so, and I really pulled as tight as I can this 12 gauge wire in there. This is a much softer wire to work with. This is nothing special. I could have used better wire. This is just 12 gauge audio amplifier wire, and I power pulled it to the remaining of the, I guess it runs to the positive. Yeah, so positive through the coil, positive to the cap, then there, and then negative just runs straight through. Just disregard these. I had to fix some wire to make a strand I didn't have at the time when I did this. These are XT150s. So coil's been running right now. I've tried various wattages, but pretty much from a low state of charge, maybe at about 20%. I did try 350 watts. It was okay. I tried about 600. It was still not getting any signs of warmth at all. And then I just eventually ran it up to its full capacity. So it's right now it's charging at just over 1,000 watts, 1100. So I mean, it's been going for about 5 minutes now at 1,000 watts. Let's see state of charge on my battery. My pack's a little bit unbalanced, is it? No, it's still okay. Actually, it's balanced up pretty okay. Running a 24S pack of A1T3 M1A cells. There are 7P24S in this pack, and pretty cool the way I had done this. So I could have used copper sheets like Dr. Bass usually would probably suggest on this battery pack, but what I ended up doing was, just for ease of building this pack, I ended up using 10 gauge strands. That's electrical wire, 10 gauge, and then I used 14 gauge to parallel them, just for obviously balancing and stuff. So these are not really current wires, but you could say they're current wires as well, but these just connect them. And the reason why I did it this way as opposed to putting a strand this way is because this battery pack is extremely tight in my bike, so I couldn't afford to make this any wider than it already is. All that's separating the two packs is a piece of I don't know what you call it, those plastic politician signs. I will eventually insulate it better, but it is it's thick and it ain't gonna go through. The only weakness of this pack is just the strand here, which obviously, you know, current just flows through the center here, which isn't the best. So the only thing I really can do is I will add two more wires, probably one in this top here, like a 14 gauge piece or 12 gauge, and one underneath to help with the current sharing on both sides. Regarding power input to the controller, there are two pieces of 10 gauge wire. Actually, yeah, this you know, I'd built this pack just to work at this point, but I'm going to improve it. But it's got two 10 gauge wires going to each adaptto controller. These other two that you may notice here, one is for the inverter for the lights, which is not hooked up yet. The other is for direct charging to the pack at 80 volts, whatever it is. So it's the same on both sides, obviously, because positive, negative, inverter, charger cable. To series the pack here, I did a pretty clever way of doing it. I just used, these are cables from Turnigy 5 amp hour cells basically, but somebody had built them for a charge harness. I just cut them off, and so there's essentially 6. I think they're 4 mil bullet connectors attached to the, I think these are 12 gauge wires, and it goes over the pack and it's series to the other side of the battery. I can add one more. I just put 6, figuring it's good enough. I think the bigger problem is probably getting the current to spread better here on this bottom strand, and the same thing on the other side, and probably improving this. But you know, I did the best I could. I did you know, this is basically where the module ends. So this 12 gauge is pulling hardest on these two cells, but obviously close to these two. And the same thing here, this one here is pulling closest to these two. So it's pretty good. I wouldn't say it's horrible, obviously it can be better, but I think we're going to improve this. And yeah, my BMS is all hooked up with some handy dandy tuck tape, so that tape is seriously strong. I left a couple of little tiny vent holes for the heat on each side. Yeah, I got my 2 breakers in there, one for each controller. And yeah, my charge coil that I've done. So, you know, she's been going for about at least 10 minutes, and she's just a tad warm. So, from my first experience with the eShep core that I had sitting around, obviously it's not this is the thing, it's called a farroit core. So it's all about the material of the core. That's really why it ended up working. It's not so much the wire. The wire obviously will help. And I said, you know, if you can do it, Dr. Bass did, I'm sure his coil will run even cooler at higher power. This just gets a little bit warm to touch. I wish I had a temperature probe to tell you. But the next charge cycle, what I'm going to do is, you know, run it right down again and charge it from 1,000 watts from 20% state of charge. I did kind of do that. I probably would say maybe I started charging at full power around 30-40% because I was testing with smaller loads, but I believe this will work, and I'm quite happy that it does, because this was just a pain in the ass to, you know, today was a little difficult because I tried using the 50 strands of 22 gauge, so that was a pain in the ass itself. But doing this wasn't so bad. Just my hands were cramped out by the time I started to do this. Everything's still pretty, you know. The poles are okay. The caps are a bit warm. My coil is falling. Hold on. All right. The wires, I would say they're about 40-50. Maybe 40-50. Yeah, 40-50 degrees. I'm touching the outside, so they're probably a little warmer. So about 17-18 strands. We're still running. We're still doing 1,000 watts. She does jump up and down, which I think is pretty normal. I don't think it's hold on. She does bounce around a little bit. I notice I haven't really done a lot of charging with the adaptto coil. I have tried it before, but I noticed that depending on the charge voltage of the charger, this may not take a charge, or it starts acting weird. So I had to lower that to 48 volts. Then it started to take a charge. But if I ran that around 54, it wouldn't take any charge. So that's an interesting fact. Again, it's that relationship to, you your charger voltage versus your battery pack. I think it has to be 24 volts less, I believe. Like, don't quote me on that. You have to check the adaptto manual. Anyways, quite happy with it. Ended up did working. Yeah, we're almost at the end of the season here, so I can enjoy a couple more rides on my beast of a bike.